flying boats played an unforgettable role throughout World War II, marking their finest hour. For anti-submarine warfare, long-range transport, and air-sea rescue, these waterbirds were indispensable. From twin-engine patrol planes to giant six-engine bombers, they offered versatility and mobility to combatants on both sides of the war. And to its crew, the flying boat offered a distinct way of life and duty unmatched by any other type of aircraft.
On the other side of the Atlantic, the Sunderland was doing its best to counter the U-boat menace. Sometimes, however, the greatest menace was not met at sea, but upon returning to base. Captain Hugh Birch of the Royal Australian Air Force.
The worst thing about flying out of England was the weather. Because, coming back to particularly a place like Oban in Scotland, where we were operating from at one stage, it was like flying up a tunnel at night, and the weather was shocking. Very, very strong winds and rain, snow. I think a lot of the younger Australian pilots lost their lives coming back to their base in England because they'd all been trained in very good weather here in Australia, on some in Rhodesia and some in Canada where the weather was good. And a lot of them lost their lives before they even got onto a enemy raid.
In the war between submarine and airplane, direct confrontation was more the exception than the rule. The greatest contribution maritime patrol gave to anti-submarine warfare was air deterrence. The number of U-boats actually sunk or damaged during the war is not high. They were, however, frequently forced to submerge far beneath the ocean's surface and thereby effectively deterred from attacking Allied shipping. When a direct attack could be made, as with this RAF Catalina, the effects were often lethal. The Catalina could hold 4 650-pound depth-charge bombs and, with a good hit, could seriously cripple or destroy an unlucky U-boat. On one routine U-boat patrol, Captain Hugh Birch and his Sunderland crew suffered an unexpected hit of their own.
We had one occasion when I was flying in the Bay of Biscay looking for a submarine, and we sighted a Dornier flying boat. And I decided it looked fairly slow. It would be a good idea to attack this, which we did, but suddenly there was a terrible explosion in our aircraft, and I asked the co-pilot to go down and see what was happening because the front gunner had stopped firing. And we'd been hit by 2 20mm cannon shells, one which blew the front off the front turret, and another one which caused a tear in the side of the starboard side of the aircraft about 12 feet long. So the whole airplane became very, very drafty. The front gunner was very badly wounded and fell back inside the aircraft, and we gave him morphia. And there was a happy ending to the story in that he married the nurse who was looking after him in hospital.
Like the Sunderland, this German Dornier flying boat was used for maritime reconnaissance. Its regular duties included reporting the locations of Allied shipping to German air bases on the mainland. From there, land-based torpedo bombers would be sent to attack the convoy at sea. Of all of Germany's World War II flying boats, the most impressive was the Blohm and Voss BV-238. Flying boats are traditionally known for their great size. In this, the BV-238 clearly excelled. An engineer could easily fit inside its massive engine nacelles. Designed for long-range reconnaissance, bomber and armed transport roles, the BV-238 was the largest flying boat ever built during the war. This prototype did not appear for flight tests until the spring of 1944. Before it could take on its bomber form, it was destroyed in a strafing attack by American Mustang fighters. With its long-range capability, the BV-238 could have easily carried its massive bomb load across the Atlantic Ocean had it appeared earlier in the war. Imagine bringing the war in Europe to American soil. The psychological impact to America's morale could have been as damaging as the physical impact to its war industry. World War II might have seen a different outcome. One giant flying boat that the Luftwaffe did have at its disposal was the Blohm & Voss BV-222 Viking. Originally built for transatlantic commercial air service, the Viking was adapted for wartime use as a long-range maritime reconnaissance and transport vehicle. Although smaller than the BV-238, the six-engine Viking was the largest flying boat in production and service during World War II. In fact, flying boats like the Viking continued to be the largest type of aircraft in production until the logistical demands of the war finally produced airstrips capable of supporting large land planes. "13 Vikings were built and served the Germans especially well, flying supplies and troops for use in North Africa. In British Africa, crude airstrips were hacked out of the thick jungle so that Allied land planes could maintain supply lines across the continent. While in West Africa, a flying boat base had been built with arguably less effort. Sunderlands operated off coastal waters in part for anti-submarine patrol. But they also flew huge shipments of supplies to East Africa, including Alexandria and other British seaports. The versatile Sunderland was not alone in this air transport role. The U.S. Navy used its large flying boats, like this PBM Mariner, for specific duty under the Naval Air Transport Service. Every war has been influenced by logistics. Success in the battlefield always depends on the strength of supply lines. Although the majority of Allied war supplies were carried in ships, a small but vital portion was flown in aircraft. Many Coronados and PBM Mariners were configured for transporting high-priority items from manufacturers in the United States to needy forces overseas. From propeller blades to Band-Aids, or just mail from home, these big flying boats could carry it all to the most remote parts of the world. And men, perhaps the most important cargo, battle-weary soldiers and sailors going home. In a matter of hours rather than days, these long-range flying boats carried men back to their families across the oceans that had separated them for so long. By mid-1943, the Allies had stemmed the Japanese tide in the Pacific, and with the air support of PBY Catalinas, they began taking back the islands they had lost. The nights were soon filled with the growl of black cats. The legendary PBYs painted coal black for camouflage in nighttime raids. As Allied forces chipped away at Japan's empire by day, the Black Cats moved with them, knocking out enemy airfields and supply lines by night. Operating from hastily prepared bases in hidden lagoons, these cats highlighted the merit of flying boats. Especially as the island-hopping campaign toward Japan progressed. The battles were long and hard. It took months of bloody fighting through the Solomon Islands before the Japanese were finally forced out of Guadalcanal. U.S. naval and marine forces fought for every island inch, but the Japanese continued to be resupplied by the infamous Tokyo Express, a supply line of warships and cargo vessels that stole through the night and refreshed beleaguered Japanese defenses. This is where the Black Cats made their mark. As daylight faded, the Cats took off into the night. Armed with fresh rounds of ammunition and 4,000 pounds of torpedoes, bombs, or depth charges, they faced little opposition under the shroud of darkness. The slow-moving Catalinas were vulnerable to anti-aircraft and fighter attack during the day, but at night, fitted with airborne radar, they were stealthy and aggressive hunters. The Japanese, who did not have radar, were often unaware of a Black Cat approach before it was too late. Hunting in packs, the Black Cats pounced on exposed enemy ships, often with devastating results. Constant nighttime attacks like this left little room for reinforcement to Japanese troops. Throughout 1943 and 1944, the Cats helped neutralize counterattacks against the gradual advance of Allied forces. Many Marines owed much of their success to Black Cat operations. And the Cat crews knew who to thank: the old reliable PBY. Its ruggedness and durability could absorb heavy anti-aircraft fire and still limp home, sometimes with only one engine running, and if necessary, it could always make a safe water landing. The versatile Cats clearly earned their keep. Japan's chances for any further advance in the Central Pacific were destroyed at the Battle of Midway. Before the first shot was fired, U.S. fleet commanders had known that the battle would be won in the sky, not on the sea. In the end, the U.S. Navy won its first decisive victory in which the aircraft carrier was the essential instrument. Over the next 3 years, the carrier task force would lead the Allies to victory in the Pacific War. The writing was on the wall. The future of naval aviation lay with carrier air power. When these air battles were over, the less glamorous aircraft, the pioneers of naval aviation, had one last duty to perform: scour the watery battlefield for the hopeful survivor gone down in his plane. For air-sea rescue, the flying boat was hard to beat. Hundreds of downed pilots escaped a watery death thanks to the reliable PBY. And perhaps hundreds more owe their thanks because these patrol planes better prepared the fleet for battle with advanced reconnaissance. Flying boats would slowly fade away from naval aviation. But many lived to remember those ungainly waterbirds long after progress would forget them. Stan Mahoney does more than remember. As a flight engineer on both the PBY and Coronado during the war, his affection for the flying boat surfaces in a variety of ways. When he's not revisiting his old stomping grounds at San Diego Bay, he indulges in his favorite hobby.
I always did like to draw pictures of airplanes, even when I was a kid in school. In fact, I even got in trouble for drawing pictures. And so when I was in PSA, they used to tell me, why don't you draw those pictures when you retire and take them, sell them at the airlines, at the air shows? So that's how come I started drawing these airplane pictures, and they sell them at the air shows. And it's been a very enjoyable hobby. And I also like to write. I write all kinds of stories, and I even wrote a book called I'm in Aviation Now. It's the whole story about all this kind of flying, illustrated by myself. This is a drawing I did of sort of an exploded view showing the interior of a PBY, starting off with your gun station up in the bow, and then the bombardier station you can see there, and the pilot stations inside. Then you come to the radioman on the right-hand side of the hull, and on this side in this picture is the navigator's station. And then you go through a bulkhead into the next compartment, and the flight engineer is up in his little cubicle above the hull, clear up above it, with a window on each side. That was really neat. Yeah, the window on the right next to your shoulder, and a window on the left next to your left shoulder. You could look out either way, but you couldn't look forward because all your instruments were forward. Aft of that is the bunk room, and then aft of that, there's another bulkhead there. After that is the two blisters where the gunners were stationed with the 50 caliber guns. Then aft of that, there's another bulkhead. After that is a tunnel hatch, which could be opened, and there was a 30 caliber gun back there as well.
As with all flying boats, PBY crew shared a special affection for their aircraft. Part plane, part boat, its missions took them where no other aircraft could go. And life on board brought a feeling of being part of something unique.
All flying boat pilots regarded themselves as a race apart, and we used to develop the myth of the flying boat crews. And as somebody once wrote to its crews, the Sunderland was much more than just a good machine. It represented a wholly distinct way of life. As with no other aircraft used by the Royal Air Force, it became war chariot, home, bed and board to the men who flew in it. A unique relationship between man and machine, firmly established from the very beginning, with its highly esoteric way of life and attitudes, the near-naval terminology in everyday speech, and by no means least, an extraordinarily close comradeship. Once airborne, a Sunderland was literally a self-contained war unit of men and machine with a breadth of possible situations and actions unknown to any land plane. So I think that's a fairly good description of the Flying Boat Union.
All crew members were just like a family. They all knew one another. They knew their families. They knew what their families at home were. And each member of the crew had specific duties, and some could do some things better than others. Like one guy could be a better cook. Another could be better at grabbing the buoy. Maybe he could hang out there and grab the buoy better than someone else. And we all worked together.
With the Japanese surrender in 1945, a war ends in which the flying boat faces an uncertain future. The aircraft carrier has succeeded the battleship as the primary naval attack ship and has become the new champion of naval aviation. While World War II was the flying boat's finest hour, it was also the beginning of the end. The increasing availability of fixed airstrips built for use in the war, and the advantages of operating aircraft from such facilities, signaled the demise of both the military and commercial flying boat. "50 years later, the flying warboats are still flying, through the spirit and in the memories of the men who flew them." When Stan Mahoney flips through his old logbook, the flying boat is alive once again.
This goes back to the first flights I made in a PBY. You look in here and see where you did something that brings the story back. So then I turn around and write this story in the book. It kind of helps you to enjoy life, see. After all, you know, I'm getting up there. See? I'm 82. So kind of keep me going.
Aviation, the art of aeronautics, began with the dreamers, inventors, and daredevils who dared to defy gravity. The journey of aviation was nurtured by pioneers like the Wright brothers, whose first flight marked a historic milestone. The role of aircrafts in world wars was groundbreaking, dramatically changing warfare strategies. This initiated a technological evolution in aviation, transforming the simplistic wings of a biplane into the thunderous roar of jet engines. Let's journey through the ages of aviation. Behind every great aircraft, there were great minds. These visionaries, like Sir Frank Whittle, the innovator of the turbojet engine, redefined air travel. Then there's Skunkworks' Kelly Johnson, the genius behind the SR-71 Blackbird. His designs combined speed, stealth, and power, crafting machines that dominated the heavens. The contributions of these pioneers have left an indelible mark on the canvas of aviation, shaping the course of history and inspiring generations of engineers and aviators. Each epoch in aviation history gave birth to extraordinary aircrafts, each with their own unique features and roles. The Lockheed SR-71 Blackbird was a marvel of speed and stealth. The Airfield 105 Thunderchief, a supersonic fighter bomber, was vital in the Vietnam War. The P-51 Mustang, a long-range fighter, was critical in World War II. The P-47 Thunderbolt, a heavyweight fighter, was used extensively in the same war. The A-10 Thunderbolt II, the Warthog, is a close air support icon. The Messerschmitt Me-262 marked a leap forward in aviation technology. Each of these game changers were instrumental in their eras, and their legacies still resonate today. Beyond the game changers, there are those that have transcended their practical roles to become icons. The Concorde was not just an aircraft, it was a supersonic symbol of luxury and speed. The B-52 Stratofortress, a strategic bomber, is an icon of power and resilience. These magnificent machines and others like them have become much more than just aircrafts. They are enduring icons that encapsulate the audacious spirit, the relentless innovation, and the boundless ambition that define the world of aviation. For more amazing aerial footage, and to join us in this incredible journey, check out the DroneScapes YouTube channel.
The only reason for an airplane to exist is to go fast. At the Great Air Meet in Rheims, Glenn Curtis set a world's record of just over 43 miles an hour, and the quest for speed was on. In 1913, Maurice Prévost was flying a streamlined Dépôt-Dessin monoplane at 126 miles an hour, and Europe claimed the lead in aviation speed. Immediately after World War I, quest for speed became a catalyst for the development of fighter planes. Countries which had not invested in new engines for their wartime fighters would, for reasons of national pride, invest in new engines to race them eastward. Then, in America in the 1930s, the situation reversed itself. Civilian aircraft, like the Travel Air Mystery Ship and the GB, Waddell Williams racers, became even faster than military aircraft. The reason was simple. Same engines were available to both civil racers and military fighters. The fighters had to carry guns, bombs, oxygen, and radios, while the racers were built only for speed. The world's absolute speed record was passed from country to country, and as the racers became faster and more powerful, they also became more expensive. America's Howard Hughes could afford to build his own racer, and with it set a land-plane speed record. But the absolute speed record of 440 miles an hour was set by a Macchi MC-72 seaplane in 1934, financed by the Italian government. Then military aircraft came back into the lead as the Heinkel and Messerschmitt firms competed for the title. Messerschmitt Bf-109R set a speed record of 469 miles an hour in 1939, a record that lasted for many years. When the jet aircraft came out, speed records rapidly accelerated, the British breaking 1,000 miles an hour in 1956 in a Fairey Delta II. Speeds continued to climb, finally reaching 2,193 miles an hour in 1976 by the Lockheed SR-71, alias Blackbird. While speed was the object, there were many other benefits in creating ever faster aircraft. Improvement in fuels, streamlining, lubricants, materials, and the list goes on. Speed produced not only prestige and pleasure, but also utility. The speed record setters ultimately paved the way for commercial transports, business jets, and private planes.